start sharing slides?
Yeah, I think everyone's ready. We may as well rip in.
All right, let's go. Well, thanks a lot for letting me join you today. All right, I think you can see my first slide, right?
Yep, looks good.
Today, all right, I'd like to talk science today, pure science. I'm not going to talk anything about product. So let's just chat about the science. And for some of you, this will be quite new. I'm going to be talking about metabolism. Some of you may not exactly know how that what that means. I'll also be talking anthocyanins, maybe also another word. Don't worry, I'll be describing those and defining them. And if your mind is kind of a little bit boggled by all of this, don't worry. I remember about 25 years ago, we were trying to describe the science of free radical biology to a whole bunch of people, to the world, the importance of antioxidants. This was crazy new science to a lot of people, and now everyone knows about it. And I promise you, this concept of metabolism is absolutely blowing up in the scientific world. We're, as usual, sort of at the cusp of this. We're leaders in this science. So this is stuff that you really need to know. And don't worry if you don't get it all the first time. And I'm going to be showing some graphs and stuff like that, some bar graphs and some pie graphs. Don't even worry about that too much. I'm going to try to sort of just outline simply what it means. So let's get started. What is metabolic health? It's going to be so important to know this. Now, when people think the word metabolic health or metabolism, often they just think about, maybe they think about weight loss. They think, oh, metabolism, I know what that is. If it's fast, that's good, right? That means I'm burning fat. Actually, we're not going there. This is a very, very narrow sliver of the interpretation of what metabolism is. So let me give you maybe just a little bit of context. I started my career in science with a biochemistry degree. And then I did a master's in biochemistry, and I was studying plant carbohydrate metabolism. So what was I doing? I was actually figuring out what goes on in the plant, all of the biochemical reactions that are related to how a plant works, and specifically how it builds its own food, how it makes sugar. And it's really quite cool. The plant takes carbon dioxide from the air and it adds it to a 5-carbon sugar molecule, and it just does a whole bunch of biochemical reactions, and eventually it makes glucose and other things. It does more than that. It takes light from the sun and through photosynthesis actually splits the water molecule and creates energy for all of these processes that are going on in the plant cell. So as you can imagine, there are thousands of reactions. We thought we knew it all, but even in the 1980s, when I did this study, I found a new enzyme and a new path and some more chemical reactions that we didn't know about. So I think you're getting the picture that metabolism is actually the biochemistry of life. It happens in plants, it happens in humans. So, the body, when it breaks down food, there's a whole bunch of chemical reactions going on. But it doesn't just break down the food, it sort of uses those building blocks to recreate and to create mass in the body, and especially for growing, to repair the tissues. So there's just a whole lot of the biochemistry of life that's happening. And so it's your body's biochemistry in this metabolic network. And you can actually sort of get a little bit of a handle or an indicator of whether or not you have healthy biochemistry going on in your body. So many of you are probably familiar with this. Just a couple of days ago, we had the Nuskin health test, and you can see I got an owie on my finger because they had to take some blood. And from that blood, they wanted to get an idea if I'm metabolically healthy. And you've done this a million times probably, where they look and they analyze it. And they had, in this case, a desktop analyzer. It was pretty cool. And they told me what my HDL level, my LDL, my total cholesterol, my glucose, how my glucose control was, and even some sort of inflammatory markers. So that's how they get sort of an indicator of how your health is. It's like a dashboard, like the dashboard on your car. And when the light flashes for your tire, you go, oh, maybe one of the tires is low, better check that. Or maybe, heaven forbid, the red light comes on that says that your oil pressure is down or that it's low. So this is kind of what our scientists and doctors are doing when they look at, the blood, and they try to get an idea of your metabolic health. So today, I've defined metabolism a little bit, but here are the things that I think questions that you need to ask, hopefully that I can answer. So what is metabolism? I've described that a little bit, right? All of the biochemical reactions. How is your metabolic health? And, how do you tell how good your metabolic health is? Touched on that a little bit. Why do I care? Sort of what causes it if I'm unhealthy, or what happens if I don't fix it? And how do I fix it? And then how am I going to feel after we fix it, or after we make sure that we're metabolically healthy? Okay, so just keep those questions in the back of your mind. So what we've found actually from recent studies, but the evidence has been mounting for the last 20 or 30 years, only a small percentage of adults are metabolically healthy. And that sort of ends up resulting in a wide variety of health conditions. So that's pretty striking, isn't it? Only 1 in 8 people, this is in the US, but lots of other studies showing around the world. So I don't think Australians or even the Pacific Islanders are scot-free here. So again, what does that mean? It means that those metabolic reactions that are the chemistry of your life aren't behaving perfectly. And it's not just the very overweight people that have to worry about that, even though we know from lots of evidence that if a person is quite overweight, that this does impact those metabolic markers, the blood lipids, the blood sugar control, the inflammation, those things are impacted. But even 2/3 of normal weight participants in these studies don't have optimal metabolic health. And you can see, actually, about 20 years ago, this became a big thing. Doctors were calling it Syndrome X, metabolic health. They were starting to be concerned that our diet, our lifestyle was leading to this kind of imbalance in our body biochemistry. And they were monitoring this a certain way, right? Through blood sugar, triglycerides, HDL, cholesterol, blood pressure, waist circumference. So if you had sort of a number of these conditions, they would say, this is a metabolic syndrome. We need to pay attention to this. And I remember sitting with our scientific advisory board 20 years ago saying, well, how do we fix this? I mean, there are ways to do it, but how do we do it from a nutritional perspective? Just a little bit more perspective here. Metabolic health is a spectrum, right? It's not just black or white. We know that poor lifestyle choices, like you're too sedentary, like you have a poor diet, you're overweight, maybe you're not getting enough sleep, maybe you're stressed, maybe you're smoking. Those are poor lifestyle choices that usually then reflect on those dashboard markers that we look at. If you're making healthy lifestyle choices like regular exercise, healthy diet, sleep, taking control of stress, not smoking, then you tend to be sort of on the healthy end of the spectrum. Now, the other day I went to a football game and we went and we bought this donut that was about a foot long. Just a crazy looking thing with all this delicious syrupy sugar on top. And my wife and I shared it, and we felt a little guilty about it. And I know that many of you are disappointed in me that I ate that. But depending upon your lifestyle and the choices that you're making, if you're generally making good choices, then you have kind of a resiliency. And if your metabolic health is good, then you'll bounce back faster. If your metabolic health is bad, then it's slower. So look at the purple line here. This is someone who's metabolically quite healthy. They have that donut and you see blood sugar rise and other things happen. But then after about an hour and a half, things sort of return to normal. So you've sort of paid for your sins somewhat because you have metabolic resiliency. But if you look at this one here, this kind of represents the guy that was sitting just next to me, a friend of mine, but he's a guy who's indulged in one too many donuts over too many years. And this would probably represent someone who's making more often poor choices and isn't metabolically healthy. And you can see here that the blood sugar will rise, and it takes a lot longer to get back to normal and baseline if it ever does. So, as you know, this is an issue. Now we know it's an issue. We want to be metabolically healthy. At Nuskin, our strategy is always to go to the sources of the problem rather than just the signs and symptoms. And so how can we help here? And so I want to share with you a little bit of a story about how we discovered some science and some observations that led us to realize that we can really help with metabolic health. We can impact it in targeting the sources of metabolic health. And the story starts a little bit with this type of plant molecule that comes from nature. So they're called anthocyanins. They're these vibrant blue and purple colors, some of them red, that we find in certain types of fruits and vegetables, and even grains like black rice, kind of unusual. These aren't things that people have a lot in their diet, but we started to learn from the literature that these impacted GI health, and I'll give you the connection later about why we were interested in this and why we thought that GI health is important for your health overall. But let's sort of delve into this a little more. We did a study, and we wanted to look at GI health in humans. And in the study, we had a bunch of people that were sort of a little bit on the verge of overweight, and we fed them the anthocyanins, and the results came back. And as we sort of hypothesized, the healthy bacteria in their gut was even healthier. They had, the population shifted, and it showed that they had a microbiome, right? Or the microflora in the GI. So that was positive. But we always, when we do these studies, do a sort of a safety check, you might say. So we look at those biomarkers, some of the biomarkers that say, have we upset a healthy metabolism? Have we upset some of those components that represent your body biochemistry? That's a good indication to us whether or not our treatment has been safe or not. And the results came back and it looked good. In fact, all of these biomarkers that we looked at for metabolism looked really good. And as I was looking over the shoulder of our research director on the results, I said, these people are a bit overweight, right? Yep. These results, they look so good. Did these people lose weight? It kind of looks like they got skinny, because this is the metabolism of a healthy, skinny person. And he said, let me check. And we went and looked at the results because we'd been checking the weight. And he said, nah, they lost a little bit, but it wasn't statistically significant. And we just looked at those results again and said, I think we're onto something here. This is interesting. This safety portion of the study that looked at metabolic biomarkers showed a huge improvement, much more than we would expect. In fact, and so, you would wonder why. So here's just sort of an outline of some of the study I'll share again later. The bacteria, the healthy bacteria increased in number, and the unhealthy bacteria in the GI tract decreased. And, here, for example, is an indicator of blood glucose control. And these folks went from sort of a high normal to a healthy normal, like really good. And this is not an easy parameter to change. And so he said, wait, we need to investigate a little bit more here. And perhaps one of the reasons why we may see a change is because people don't often get enough of these anthocyanins. So look in Australia, guys, we're not doing so good down here in Australia. This is your mean intake of anthocyanins in milligrams per day. And you can see it's pretty close to zero in Australia. China's doing a little bit better. If you can see there, about 25 milligrams per day. And in fact, the Chinese government has now an RDA, or recommended daily allowance for these, a level of about 80. So they're starting to recognize the importance. France doing pretty good. But the target dose, we feel, based on all of the best studies, should be around over 200 milligrams a day. So we started to look at the literature and see, well, are there other studies showing that anthocyanins impact metabolic health? And indeed, we did find lots of studies that showed that, for example, an anthocyanin-rich diet increases fatty acid oxidation. That's good. Insulin sensitivity. These are indicators of metabolic health. Glucose uptake and carbohydrate metabolism, the muscle was up. This is good, right? This is now, your dashboard is good. There aren't any red lights on it yet. The pancreas, beta cell function, blood lipids down. This is great. And the liver also, all positive signs. So the literature was starting to point also clues saying that these anthocyanins somehow at a good dose impact all of those markers of metabolic health, the dashboard that you're looking at. So we actually then sort of really did a broad literature search. This took quite a while, maybe a year. And, I've shared with you sort of like a car dashboard, but scientists have a lot of metabolic biomarkers to look at. So now we're looking more like the cockpit of a 747 in terms of all of these biomarkers. Now, when you have a metabolically healthy choice, in this case, it's exercise, you will see that these markers in the liver, the fat tissue, the skeletal muscle, the pancreas, they're all going the right direction. So imagine someone who is not making healthy choices, then they would have low levels of this first one in the liver, CPT1A. You don't need to know what it is. It's an enzyme that catalyzes a particular reaction in the body that is healthy, represents healthy metabolism. And so when you make a healthy choice, it goes from low to higher. For, let's say, oxidative stress in the liver, it goes from high to low if you have a metabolically healthy choice. So I wanted to compare that with individuals from lots of studies that are having a diet that is rich in anthocyanins. And if it's good, it should look like these metabolically healthy choices. And so you can see here from the heat map that not everything is the same, but boy, it looks a lot like these people are making healthy choices. And the only difference is these folks are having a diet that is rich in these anthocyanins, more along the 200 milligrams than the small amount that the average Australian or American gets. So the anthocyanin-rich diet helps shift our body biochemistry to a healthier mode. We also noticed from these studies that anthocyanins and exercise together have even more comprehensive benefits. So this then led us to do more studies. And let me share with you, I'm probably supposed to finish about now, but what the heck? Let's delve into a little deeper, shall we? We wanted to, we've got incredible laboratories in the US and in China. And the first thing that we did was we need to understand the chemistry. What are these bioactive molecules? And it's a family of bioactive molecules. So we needed to choose the right plant and the ones that were richest in these biomolecules and characterize them so that we knew the most powerful. So we were able to rank from all of these studies some of those plants that were richest in anthocyanins, but also the ones that were most potent. Let me share with you how we found the most potent. The way that we did that was we did in vitro tests where we have a lining of cells that represent the GI cell wall. And we wanted to see which ones protected that GI lining. And what we found was the most powerful were these two anthocyanins, cyanidin, delphinidin. Let me take a break here and just tell you why we did this study. Why are we looking at the cells that line the GI tract? Well, the reason is because you have, in your GI tract, you're eating all sorts of food and it's going through this long sort of channel. It's going through the stomach and then sort of the upper intestine, the lower intestine. And it's very important for digesting food and nutrients, right? You know that. But also, as I described, there's all sorts of bacteria in that GI tract. Most of them, a lot of them friendly, some of them unfriendly. By the time you get to sort of the lower colon, that's not stuff that you want anywhere near the beautiful sterile interior of your body, right? Your blood, your tissues. So the GI tract must keep this very separate. There must be a barrier function there. It's called the gastrointestinal barrier function, and it must be tight. It must really be very selectively permeable. Now, to give you an idea, you have these cells look like little villi, and on top of the cells, there are microvilli, which gives it a huge surface area. We're talking about the size of 2 tennis courts. So when you think about it, that huge surface area has to protect your sterile blood and tissue from kind of all of the nasty stuff that is in the GI tract. And there are certain components of bacteria that are called endotoxins. They slough off the bacterial cell wall, things that are called LPS. If your cells, and especially your immune cells, even get a whiff of those nasty endotoxins, then it will absolutely disrupt your metabolism. They cause all sorts of inflammatory reactions. And this is one of the major reasons why our metabolic systems start to go awry. This is a great area to target. So we're finding then that the cyanidin, the delphinidin, are helping to protect and to make sure that that cell wall in the GI tract is nice and tight. We did more studies that showed protection of the GI tract. And you can see here in the black, a high-fat diet causes more of these endotoxins to get through. But if you add anthocyanins, you're more like the control. It's causing the cells of the GI tract to be much more healthy. And one of the ways that it does that is that apparently the anthocyanins help feed the friendly bacteria, and their metabolism actually releases these short-chain fatty acids that are the main energy source for these cells that line the GI tract. It keeps them healthy, keeps them plump, and gives them nice tight junctions so that that 2 tennis court sort of surface area keeps all the bad stuff out and prevents the body from becoming inflamed and affecting the biochemistry of the body. So a lot of the studies that we did focused on how tight is that GI barrier and how healthy are the gut bacteria as a result of these anthocyanins. Here's some more studies that look at glucose metabolism and even beyond some of the things that you would expect. Here's liver health. You see on the left here, this is the control. This is a healthy liver. If you see in this one in the middle, lots of white dots, that means that fat is accumulating in the liver, in the, between those cells. And this is an unhealthy sort of high fat diet sort of liver. Now you can feed a high fat diet, but as long as you have anthocyanins here, you can see an amazing protective effect. This looks more like the controls. So the knock-on effect of having a healthy microbiome and a nice, tight, healthy GI tract is huge for the body's overall health. This is the study that I described earlier. And here's another study. So this was actually on healthy college students. And we wanted to see how quickly you can get an effect of healthy anthocyanins in the diet. So this was one bad meal, like a meal where they were forced to eat like a bunch of these nasty hamburgers. It was really hard to finish, really high fat, very unhealthy, a lot of sugar in it. And what we showed was these are the plasma endotoxins, right? So these are the nasty things that are on the bad side of the gut, and measuring how much gets through into the blood. And we see that with the placebo, this big black box means that a lot of these endotoxins got through. But with this one meal, also anthocyanins were fed to these college students, there was a huge protective effect. And the amount of the endotoxins that got through was much lower. This is a little bit like that resilience chart that I showed you earlier. So doing a glucose tolerance type of test, we see in the presence of anthocyanins, a much faster recovery. That shows really good, resilient metabolic health right there. So then, to summarize, we discovered the right, most potent sort of forms of anthocyanins and the right sources. We did a bunch of studies and showed that they bolster metabolic health in terms of, all those metabolic biomarkers that we talked about, only not just the dashboard of the car, but, more like the 747 dashboard. We see that the mechanism of action is the microflora are healthy. And so then they impact the nice tight junctions of the GI tract, and they prevent the immune cell from being upset and then affecting the entire body's metabolism. And showed that then supports the metabolic health. As I mentioned when I started, this is a fairly new area. Other people are starting to notice, but we have already done 5 studies that have been published in this area. We are off to an amazing start in helping people to understand the importance of metabolic health. Now, I asked right up front, how is your metabolic health, right? So here's the test for you. How do you know how your metabolic health is? Well, it's through looking at the biomarkers of metabolic health, right? How can you tell? Sometimes it's how you feel, but a lot of it's invisible. So you have to look at that dashboard. And so why do we care? Well, maybe that's a whole nother talk, but let's just say if you're in your car and some of those lights are on the dash that say your car needs attention, You may be able to drive it for a while, but if you don't pay attention to those things, you can almost guarantee that you're going to have to pull off to the side of the road before you reach your destination. And we're talking about life and the sources of good health. So I would call my destination meaning living to a good ripe age and having good health all the days of my life. That's the destination that I want. And if we don't take care of these dashboard lights, the dashboard lights of healthy metabolism, we may be pulling up to the side of the road faster than we thought. So, the mechanisms that I talked about are inflammatory balance, the microbiome and the gut health, and also these anthocyanins are very important antioxidants. And the results are they affect your immunity in a very healthy way. That means you don't have an overactive immune system that is upsetting your metabolism. And in the same sort of mechanism, you're actually protecting all of the vital organs, your cardiovascular health, your liver, as I already demonstrated, and these other things. So that's why we should care. And, we're really excited that we have discovered this, basically a super, what would I call it? I guess a superfood, really, to help beef up all of these systems so that you'll have a healthy metabolism. So I guess I'll stop sharing the slides now. And apologies for going over time a little bit, but I hope that helped.